Today on the Coach of Why podcast, we have a very special guest. He wrestled at SMC after high school and completed his college wrestling career at Findlay University. He's now back at SMC as the first head coach after a 30-year hiatus. In his first 2 years, he went undefeated, and he won back-to-back MCCAA conference championships. And after year 2, his team finished number 17 in the country, as well as having a JUCO All-American. Today, we welcome Coach Todd Hesson to the Coach of Why podcast.
With the world of coaching evolving and the carousel always changing, we're going to sit down with some coaches and we're going to figure out what they coach, how they coach, and most importantly, why they got into this profession. My name is Kason Wilkinson, and I am your host of the Coach's Why podcast.
That was my Coach's Why.
Welcome back to another Coach of Why podcast. We have a very special guest in the building today, Coach Todd Hesson from Southwest Michigan Community College. Coach, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Of course, yes, sir. Coach is a wrestling coach up there, and similar to some of the previous coaches we've had, we've talked a little bit over the past few years about getting some kids to the next level, and we just kind of kept that relationship going. And as Coach mentioned off the air, it's his first one, so he's on uncharted waters. But I'm excited. I think that we're going to get some good gems out of it, and Coach, just kind of let you know, or I should say, to kind of get it started, why don't you go ahead and let us know where you grew up and when you got involved in sports in general, but, obviously with you being a wrestling coach, when you got involved in the sport of wrestling.
I grew up locally, so Dowagiac, Michigan, which is where Southwestern Michigan College is at. I actually attended here. I went to high school locally, Decatur, Michigan. I've always kind of played some sports. I was a late starter to wrestling. I actually began it in gym class, and it just kind of evolved from there. So,
yeah. So with you doing all sports and things like that, did you? Let me ask you this: did you have a chance to go compete at the next level in wrestling or any of your sports?
I did. I actually wrestled here at Southwestern Michigan College. When I was finished here, I wrestled at, it was Findlay College when I was in school, which is the early, mid-'80s. It's now Findlay University. So
Gotcha. Okay. So you went from Michigan to Ohio, obviously a really, really good region for wrestling. What have you noticed being – obviously you grew up there, right? And you're still around that same area. I know I have this question for you at the end, but I know it's one of the better regions, at least, debatably one of the better regions in the country for wrestling. But I guess what's your opinion on from when you were in school and when you grew up wrestling in that area and obviously in college in Ohio to now being a coach back in your hometown and then obviously still being in that region? How has wrestling changed or developed from, obviously when you were in school and when you competed to now that you're a coach and you're seeing these kids? How has it changed, and what do you feel about the sport of wrestling now up there?
Excuse me. The two biggest changes that I would say off the top of my head would be the development of youth wrestling. I mean, even when I was in school, I don't think we had a middle school program. And so now, we have My Way, which is our Michigan youth wrestling. That's one big thing. So, kids are coming out with so much more experience now. And, in the old days, you kind of paid your dues. So you were a freshman, JV wrestler, freshman team, whatever it might be, then you kind of worked your way up. And now, with kids starting so young, they're so good, so fast, you can jump right in and be a freshman and make an impact at the state meet. The other thing that I noticed or that I realized is that technique has changed so much. I tell our kids all the time that when I was in school, we didn't really have leg counters. We didn't have slide bys. We didn't have all the wrestling technique that we have now. And it's just so developed that it's fantastic. I just, looking back to, again, the early mid 80s, they're just, it was more of a rough and tumble sport, which is what I think attracted me to it. But now the experience level, going into high school and coming out of high school, and the technique is really the two biggest changes I've seen.
Yeah, and so like the technique and some of the stuff is grown. And another thing I've heard from just being, even from when I was in school is I feel like the athleticism and like the speed of things kind of being able to, maybe not the speed, but the athleticism of some, like for example, heavyweight, right? Heavyweight back in the day, right? Really, I wouldn't even say back in the day, even maybe 10, 15 years ago was really all about size and being bigger than the other guy. And now you're seeing guys who they might be rocking around, they might be 285, but really, they're athletic, right? These guys can shoot doubles, they can shoot this, they can shoot that. And they might be 285, but they're stout, or might be 265 with speed or whatever their weight is. And so like the athleticism of some of these athletes also, I feel like has changed a little bit as well. Not only the technique, but the youth as well, as you mentioned. But I think that's some of the big changes. Obviously, I can't say, right, you were wrestling in the 80s, so you've seen kind of everything change. But that's just something I've noticed just being a fan of the sport from even, whenever I was in high school, and how much that's changed a little.
I would agree with that. The athleticism, the workouts, and I'm not talking just weights, but all of the other programs that you have, nutrition, so it is definitely developed, better athletes and better wrestlers at a younger age.
For sure, yeah, and youth is a big part of it. I think that the most successful programs, and I can't say everywhere, but I do feel like successful programs of the high school level have a youth program associated either at their school or in their area for these kids to grow up in, right? I know that was one of the first things that my coaches my administration wanted me to do, is to revamp our youth program. And when I was in high school, we started the youth program X amount of years before that. And then by the time we got there, right, all those guys who were in that sport at the time or in that program, that's when you really start to see the change. So, it's not a quick overturn, I feel like, for some schools. Some schools are faster than others, but I think the youth, as you mentioned, is a huge piece of not only better wrestlers, but school successes over time, especially if a coach is going to be there for 5, 10, 15, 20, or, however many years. It's a big piece of it for sure. So as you mentioned about like since you mentioned you did get to compete at SWCC or SWMCC, there we go. And then you went to
We cut it even shorter. We just go SMC.
SMC. All right, I like it. All right, SMC. So you wrestled there, and then obviously you mentioned you wrestled at Finley. So as you developed in the sport of wrestling, when did you realize that you could compete at the next level, and what was your recruiting process like? At the time. So, was it a tournament you went to? Was it just coaches coming to starting to talk to you? Was it you knew somebody? Like, what was your when did you know you could go? And then what was your recruiting process like when you're in it?
That's a good question. It's a kind of a funny, ironic question. I don't know that I was ever talented enough to wrestle at the next level. And I tell our kids all the time that, as I bring kids in, and this is the beginning of our third season here at SMC. They had it 70s, 80s, and then they discontinue all programs in the early to mid 90s, and then they just brought it back 3 years ago. So, as I'm looking at that, I remember talking to Coach Judd, who was the first coach here at SMC, and it was not much of a recruiting process as compared to what I try to do now and what I see other coaches. And I think the only two things that probably got me through it is, I was a hard worker who lacked talent, and definitely lacked experience, but I was a hard worker, and, I love the sport, and I could handle the rough and tumble part of it, the physical part of it. I actually enjoyed that part of it. So I think those are the two things that kind of got me through. And believe me, as I look around, again, I realize how how much talent I really lack compared to what kids nowadays have. It's impressive. It's fun to watch these kids now, and whether it's here at school or anywhere else. If you're
Yeah.
watching on Flow and you're going to tournaments, it's just impressive to see it.
It is. So what was it like too? Because like I know I talked a little bit about you going to SMC, but you had a chance to go to Findlay right afterwards, and you continued wrestling there. So, what was that transition like for you when you got, you competed at the JUCO level, and then you went to Findlay? What was that? Was it a shock to you? Was it how did you transition, and what was your thoughts whenever you actually did make that move?
It was a change in the fact that I was going to school here at home. And so it was much more familiar. And then you get down in Findlay, Ohio, which is, it's about 4 hours from here. And just being away from home and meeting, I was a pretty quiet guy, meeting new people. Although I will say that wrestling helped me meet other students, whether it was at Findlay or other schools. So that part was helping to break the ice. But it was definitely an adjustment. Just, again, seeing the quality of wrestling and the experience out there. But listen, it made me who I am, for better or worse, but it was a good experience all the way around. I was very fortunate.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it was a good time there. And, obviously I love it whenever a sport can bring out the social side, even if you're not so social, to allow those interactions, which help, hopefully, anyways, build your own personal confidence, but also will help build those post college and post school interactions that you're gonna have in the real world. So I love that was something that got brought out of you because of that, because of sport of wrestling, but also because of that transition into Findlay. So was there ever a coach in your life who made an impact on? Let me reword that. I don't like how that sounded. What coach made the biggest impact on your life? Who was he or she, and why? And if there's more than one, you can go into plural. But go ahead and let me know who that was and why.
There was two coaches. One was on the technical side, the actual physical wrestling side of it was John Green. A great coach, had a great mind for wrestling, not only technique, but just strategy overall. Mm-hmm. And then Coach Judd here at SMC, and I think that he was much more of a mentor and a father figure that you just, you learned a little bit about life and learned a little bit about yourself. And so those two guys had a huge impact on me. Now, at the time, I didn't realize it. I mean, I had no idea. I was just a kid trying to grow up, figure out life. But now looking back, I realize, the impact they had.
Yeah. So when it comes to like coaching and knowing that obviously you wrestled in high school, you went to a 2-year, went to a 4-year, and now you've been coaching for X amount of years. Let me ask this. How long have you been coaching, and what was your timeline like? So essentially, like, what school you started at, where you started, and how did you, what was your timeline to get to SMC?
Let's see. Ooh, that was a long time ago, so I got to start putting together the timeline in my mind. So, and I was just speaking rough terms, that I started just kind of a volunteer. I still had a younger brother in high school, so I'd go up and work out there. And then after he graduated, I kind of bounced around to, the old mat rat type of terminology where I was just trying to get on the mat. And then my first experience as actually getting paid, this is how old I am, that I actually replied to a classified ad looking for an assistant coach. And it was at Brandywine High School in Niles, Michigan. I went there and worked for, and this is the third guy that had an impact, Bob Galvin. He had a lot of experience. He was just looking for an assistant coach, and I just learned a tremendous amount of wrestling, and not just wrestling, but people skills in general, dealing with kids, dealing with administration, dealing with parents, all of the things that go, all the intangibles that go with wrestling. So, and I was there. We had some success. He retired, left wrestling, and then changed schools. And he started again at Niles High School, which is just down the road from Brandywine. And he asked me if I wanted to be an assistant again, and I said, I was young, and I was like, yeah, let's do it again. And then as we progressed, we had some success. Then he retired from both coaching and teaching, and I was an assistant for probably 7 years. Again, a little bit fuzzy. You got to remember it was a long time.
Hey.
So he left, and I really never wanted to be a head coach. An assistant coach has it made because you're getting on the mat. You're physically out there wrestling. The head coach has got so much paperwork and other responsibilities. And again, going back to even when I was in college, I was a little bit of an introvert. And I realize now that there's a lot of wrestlers out there that are just quiet, introverted people that, and I think the two match up. Now, don't get me wrong. I know lots of wrestlers who are, extroverts and have lots of energy and have, very good social skills and a little bit higher or different energy level, I guess. So when I'm looking at being a head coach, I was like, there's no way, I'm thinking about things like seating meetings and banquets and talking to the team. Yep. All the things that are a little bit overwhelming to someone who's quiet and, again, an introvert. But so he retired, and we had a couple kids on our team at Niles that were going into their senior year, and they were actually really good athletes, and they could have easily played basketball, but they chose to wrestle. So I was like, hey, listen, I will do it one more year just to get you through your senior year. I felt I owed it to them because, they'd made a commitment early on to wrestle, not play basketball. They were just good athletes in general. So I stayed that 1 year, and then I decided, and I had some younger assistant coaches. I really got a late start on head coaching. Real late start. Like I was 44 when I started, and I was still on the mat at that age wrestling with kids. But, I had some other young guys that were an assistant with me with that 1 year that I was a head coach. And, we talked about it. It's like, hey, we could do this better. I know that we could add more to it. So it kind of just morphed and evolved from there. Kept going, coached at Niles as a head coach for 14 years or so. And I say or so again, my timeline is a little bit fuzzy. But, I learned then that I had to make a decision. I always tell myself, listen, I can be a good banquet coach, a good speaking coach, speak eloquent, or I can just focus on being a good wrestling coach. And so instead of looking at the negatives of which I perceived as, I don't want to say social interaction, but definitely public speaking and all the things that go along with it. I just decided that, hey, I'll just focus on the coaching aspect of it. And again, I got to give a lot of credit, obviously, to kids and parents, but assistant coaches, and you find pieces of the puzzle. You find, as you get older, even now at SMC, I'm not going to get on the mat very often, but so you find the coaches that can do that part of it. And you find coaches even in high school that I had assistant coaches. One of them was Tom Dessenberg, did a great job, very unassuming, but he liked speaking in public, so he did a lot of that, and he handled a lot of that. And I'm sure a lot of people thought he was probably the head coach based on that. So you find the right mix and the right pieces to the puzzle, put them in place, and kind of go from there. So that's what I did as far as high school. We had some pretty solid teams up here. It was really based on, just showing up every day and working hard and, following directions, which I still use as part of my, criteria and recruiting even now. So then we roll forward. We got into COVID. It was just kind of an odd time for everybody. Yeah. Decided that, I'd be done with it, and I was good with it. And then SMC started up a program. I wasn't really sure. Another young coach in the area, Sam Hanau, he runs Michigan West club team, and he was always helpful at the high school level. And ironically, he was at our rivals. He was from our rivals school, and Sam did a great job in the fact that he didn't care where you were from. He just wanted to make better wrestlers in our area. And he talked to me a few times about it, and he said, hey, you can go there and, restart a program. It'd be good for the area. It'd give kids an opportunity for wrestling, but more importantly, it gives them an opportunity for education. So kind of like the whole Niles thing is like, all right, let me give it a try and see what happens. And, a lot of trial and error throughout the whole process, probably more error than anything else. We got through it. And anyway, it just kind of led to where I'm at now.
Wow. Yeah. So you've had a lot of experience as an assistant to lead you to the head coaching side of things. And so I actually have two questions based off of that. I'll start with this one. Do you think that spending all that time as an assistant coach, because I know some people maybe don't, may not appreciate the assistant coaching side of things to where they're ready to jump right into the head coaching, right? I really was only an assistant coach for a year and a half total before I got my head coaching job. So I didn't have a lot of, somebody to look under, versus you were under somebody for many years before you got to the head coach and you chose to do that. So do you think that spending all that time as an assistant truly prepared you for the head coaching, or was there still things that, you might not have been prepared for that even though you were an assistant around it, you still might not have been prepared for until you got that title?
I think that it prepared me in ways like, structure, how to handle kids, how to handle all the things on the outside. I also know that the paperwork and all of that has progressed, even when I started. We've got track wrestling now, we've got flow wrestling, we got all those things that, in the times that I started, you had, paper brackets, and you went to CD meetings and you manually did everything, where now you enter everything on track. And so again, finding the right assistants to help with that, because I have zero technology skills, as you know. I could barely do Zoom meetings. So
you're doing a damn good job so far, though.
Oh, thank you. So, you have to find the right pieces. And I am a firm believer that anything that we've accomplished, and I'm going to take the kids and the parents out of the equation for a second, and the administration, is direct result of assistant coaches, at least in my work. Ben.
Right. Well, I mean, assistant coaches make a big difference in delegation and getting your word down, right? If they're bought into your vision as a coaching staff, it's easier to get kids bought in, and which then leads to everybody else down the line. So 100% agree with having good coaches around you to make your job easier as a coach, but also make your program a little bit better. So I know that you talked a little bit, or you've dove into when you got started, where you started at, and kind of how it fell into your lap of both coaching in high school, but also coaching at SMC. So let me ask you this: what do you love about coaching, and what do you dislike about it, if there's anything that you dislike?
Oh, if, believe it or not, I'd have to think a little bit about the dislike part. The what I love about it is, and you know, at Niles and the same way at SMC, we had a lot of young kids, very diverse group of kids, very different in social economic, but they were all trying to figure out life in some way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. And I think the biggest thing for me is just seeing them progress on the mat, but more importantly, off the mat. I mean, I remember one young man that, he was the first to graduate from high school in his family. And, that was ballpark, 2006, 2007, 2008, somewhere in there. So it was relatively, I mean, it seems like a long time ago now, but when you put it in those terms that somebody might not graduate from high school, it was kind of an eye opener there. So I really enjoyed that part of it. I did. What I probably would dislike most, or what I found most painful, was probably falling short of goals, and more importantly, kids falling short of goals. The wrestler who thought he was going to be a state champion or a state placer or a state qualifier, not reaching those goals. Those are the ones that actually stick out. I mean, I've got some that I just, even to this day, I can remember. It's like, man, if we just done a little bit more, and I think coaches will always say, that you remember more of the losses than the wins, and probably even more so. I mean, I agree as a team, because we have the team duels in state as well as the individual, but kids falling short of their goals on the mat,
For sure. Yeah, that's a big one.
That I disliked.
I agree with that. Yeah. Whenever you see kids work so hard, especially kids who might work their whole life for the sport and, from a young age, and, they're just in a tough weight class, and they just end up, they might make one finals match their whole career. I had a guy who was a senior who been wrestling since he was 5 or 6, and he was one of the best in that the state had, and a lot of people knew him, and he fell short in the finals, and that was hard for me to see. And I know that's definitely a hard piece of it, so I definitely would concur with that, how difficult that can be. And I know that you mentioned a little, like, actually I have a few things written down here that I want to touch base on really quick before we get into like the back half of the episode, talking about recruiting and some of the coaching stuff. Is, I know you mentioned how you were an introvert, and obviously you mentioned how still to this day, wrestlers and as a whole, you see a lot of kids who are introverted. So how do you coach those type of kids, right? The kids who might not be social, who might not be, whatever their character is, and however they interact with people or you, right? It might be easier for you to coach somebody who's social because they're very responsive, they're very blah, 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 right? But an introvert's opposite. So how do you coach kids who are introverted, quiet, that don't have much reaction from either positive words or negative? I wouldn't say negative words, but from positive conversations to like whenever you're irritated, there's no real difference in reaction.
Two parts of it. One, being an introvert, I understand I at least think I understand their comfort level or their uncomfortable part of it, trying to figure it out. I also think that having assistant coaches, especially even now, I mean, starting as a head coach at 44, there's still that generational age gap. And definitely now, as somebody who's older, 62, I always tell kids I'm 95, but being older, that you need those younger assistant coaches that help relate. You're not always kids are always going to hear what you say or listen to what you say, but they also need somebody they're going to relate to. And so, again, another piece of the puzzle is some of the younger coaches that, listen, I take my time and try to figure out, kids and what they like as far as music and video games and all the other things that go along with it. But I don't think it's the same as some of the younger coaches relating to kids. And you slowly see kids, and we've got some on our team that are definitely introverts, but they also they have to feel a comfort level, with other kids, with the campus, with the coaching staff, what's going on. And that's a little bit of a process,
Yeah.
especially here, because, when you're coaching in high school, you typically see kids, especially now that you have a youth program, and you see them there and you see them in middle school and you see them 4 years in high school. So you get to know them a little bit better. I mean, personally, and then also wrestling wise, you have an idea what they use for technique, or, and even some of the things that go on in home life, or, school and different things like that. Here, it's a much quicker process. You're getting kids from all over, and they're mixing in and they're trying to figure it out. They're learning how to go to college, and just adapting to everything. So it's definitely a process, but I see it taking place now with some of our kids that I would consider quiet, that now they're opening up and they're being a little chatty, and they've got jokes, and and that's part of it. And a lot of team bonding is at this level. A lot of team bonding. That's huge.
That is huge. Yeah, it's good to know that's still something that you focus on as a college. I know that's something that a lot of high school coaches do, and they focus on team bonding, fundraising things, whatever their case is. So, whenever you're mentioning these things about athletes and some of the introverted kids coming out of the shadows, if you would, and they're really starting to interact. So, and you're mentioning recruiting a little bit. So that leads me to this question is, I have some true recruiting questions, but I'm going to ask about this part of it first. So whenever you're talking to athletes and you're trying to get kids in, right? I don't know how you necessarily find them and do that, which I'll get to later. But do you sometimes use your assistant coaches to help get kids in? If you've had like an interaction with the high school coach and they're like, hey, yeah, this kid's this, and they say they are more of a introvert, or they may say something that your assistant coaches are more in tune with. Do you use your assistant coaches in recruiting to help get, for that maybe bridging the gap of that initial interaction, or are you kind of the main source, regardless of who it is? Obviously, I know you'll be the guy at the end of the tunnel, no matter what, to say yes or no, but do you use them to help out with that side of recruiting?
As we've progressed and evolved and basically learning how to do things and figure things out, yes, huge part of it. Especially if let's say you've got a lightweight coach that's very good, or a heavyweight, or whatever the case may be. Definitely. I won't say the first couple years, only because we were all trying to figure it out. And before I could get them to figure it out, I had to figure out some things. But now, as you bring in coaches that, have college experience and have college, not just wrestling experience, but campus life experience, social experience. It does play into it. It does. And I'm just learning now, just scratching the surface of that part of it.
And do you ever do that for, like, if this kid's more social versus this kid might be more introverted, like, do you take the introverted kid and then they might take the more social kid, or is it kind of just, is it just more of a feel thing that's like, all right, Coach X, I want, or they might talk to somebody first? Are you, like, does that make sense? Do you have that initial, okay, this kid's this way, so I want you to talk, versus this kid's this way, I'm going to talk to them type of thing?
A little bit of both. In some cases, you have a coach that may have worked with, local or regional kids and has a connection with them. So that part plays into it. Like, you might have a lightweight coach that's done some club work or clinics, or, it could be, I say a lightweight coach, it could be a heavyweight coach, it could be any coach. Yeah. So yes, you just kind of find the pieces, again, to the puzzle. And I've learned, and even as I recruit, kids, I tell them and their parents, I said, listen, I'm an introvert by nature. Being a coach and now having to recruit at another level, I've had to learn to step out of my comfort zone. I've learned to, okay, you're going to have to figure things out. I'm self-talking now and say, hey, listen, you got to step outside of that introverted zone. The one thing that I will say, that being an introvert, it's draining at the end of the day or end of the week or end of the season, because you've had to, I think with extroverts and, kids who are very social, they're just used to it. And so it's second nature, where an introvert, and again, I could be wrong, I'm just speaking for myself, you have to exert a lot of extra energy to try to, I don't want to say force yourself to be an extrovert, but, work at being the social, or, being able to relate to kids and their parents socially.
Right.
Verbally and all the other things. So yeah, you do have to figure out a way to step outside your comfort zone.
For sure. Yeah.
It's tough. And, sometimes I come back after recruiting and I'm like, man, you did a great job. You knocked it out of the park. Other times I come back and I'm like, if I was a grade at it, you'd probably get a C- or a D+ on that.
Right.
So, and sometimes you just have to figure it out. It's part of being, human nature. You just gotta, again, the trial and error.
100%.
So starting to utilize more assistant coaches, definitely.
Sweet. Hell yeah. Obviously, we're as we talk and as we discuss a little bit more about your recruiting side of things and how you're working with the coaches and having your coaches help you, are you taking athletes? So for one, I know that you've been ranked before in your short time at SMC. And I know you had some ranked wrestlers this year. So tell me a little bit about like your recruiting. Are you kind of recruiting in the state of Michigan? Are you going out of the state? What's your pipeline? I mean, tell me a little bit about how you're getting athletes and bringing in enough talent and the type of talent to be, nationally recognized as a program.
Ooh, that's a lot of different levels to that. So I'm trying to put all the pieces in place. First of all, I had zero idea how to recruit. And second of all, being a little bit of an introvert, I don't think I'm necessarily good at recruiting. I just think I'm good at being myself, if that makes sense. And I've got a pretty much an open door policy that if a kid's willing to come to SMC, go to class, turn in their work, follow directions, show up every day, work hard, I'm open to anybody. Now, within that whole group of kids, you got kids that might be able to wrestle at another level, but they may not have the grades for it, or maybe they're overwhelmed by a big campus where this is a much smaller campus. And like we said before we had that break, I'm just now starting to utilize, assistant coaches. I've got one right now that is just very good at, and he's a little bit of an introvert too. But he's got a very good relationship with kids and knows everybody. And even, some of the kids on our team are great recruiters. Like, hey, coach, I know this kid, he's from my high school, or hey, I trained with him, or I wrestled on a summer team with him, or whatever the case was. And so I really believe kids are great recruiters. Kids are going to know when you're recruiting them that, yeah, you're going to be all, cupcakes and ice cream because you're promoting your college, but they're getting the real version from their former teammates or some of their kids that they know, or, and then you got social media, which again, judging my performance on this Zoom, you know that I don't have any social media skills. So all the Instagram and all the groups and everything else. So it's been kind of a unique way of recruiting, and so that's a little bit of not that we have a science to it, but it's like all hands on deck and they all kind of tend to help out.
Yeah. Well, I know I know that when we first talked, the very first time, you didn't have a wrestling room. And then the second time we talked, you guys were literally putting in the mats and getting your facility put together. And I know some programs don't have that opportunity to have their own kind of designated space. So is that a recruiting tool that you think you might have an advantage on, that you can bring a kid in and you can show them your wrestling room for SMC, all of your stuff? And obviously whenever you sent it to me, I thought it looked really good. But is that something that you're able to, or not only able to, but is that something that you use whenever you're trying to get kids in, especially if you're in a battle with another school?
Yeah, we're going to lose that battle. I mean, we've got one of the ugliest wrestling rooms you'll ever see. It's literally, it was cubicles and office space, and it's got a couple columns in it. And it's pieced together as far as mats. We got a blue mat, we got a green mat. But it's kind of progressed from there. And quite honestly, the kids that we have now, each, again, we're going to our third year. So this is our first real big turnover in numbers of kids. And they kind of like the wrestling room, they like the ugliness that goes along with it. And at the same time, SMC is working towards building a new one. So we're kind of looking forward to that. But at the same time, when we're finally out of this room, I'm guaranteeing you I'll have a picture of it, and I'll have it framed, and I have it in the new wrestling room, because I want kids to see where we were and where we are.
Yeah. Well, I think that even though you're saying that, like, it's ugly, right? Like some programs are literally sharing they're rolling a wrestling mat out every day before practice, on the basketball gym or aux gym or, wherever they are. So I understand, right? Like, it's not pretty right now, but the idea is that you have a place that you guys can go that's sacred to you guys, even if it's an ugly, miscolored, mismatched room. It's still something that other places may not even have. So, if that's important to somebody, you may lose that battle. But if you're recruiting against a school that doesn't have that, right, you might stand out, even if it isn't the most attractive looking room, for sure.
Yeah, I think the kids really get to a point where they kind of adopt it as their home, and their home base, at least. And, one of the nice things is we have a kitchen attached to this room. So we try to keep it stocked with snacks and different things like that. So
Sweet.
I want to draw the kids in so they have a way of, again, making it a little bit more at home. We got we got a TV and a video game in there. So, so we're trying to draw them in with some of the other things that, and we have talked about it, that we are fortunate that when we first started here, that was their plan, was to lower down a mat every day, roll it out, wrestle in the gym along with, all the other sports that are taking place, and then roll it up and hoist it back up. So we are fortunate in that. And SMC has been very supportive and very good about things. And like I said, they're working on a new room. So, I give them credit for that in year 3. And we also will add women's wrestling next year. So we're really progressing. And that's a credit to everybody. But from willing to, take that initiative and add more and look at adding a room and looking at adding a women's program and, just kind of building on top of the foundation.
Yeah, and I actually usually like to ask this question about, like, resources, and I mean that, like, for example, right, Division I, they have NIL, they have transfer portals, they have all the money in the world for the most part, right? I know, and even then, right, like, Big Ten is different than a mid-major, and this is any sport, right? SEC, all that stuff. But it sounds like you have a very supportive both community and admin and organ and institution to help grow that. And you're also in a very good region for wrestling. So, obviously Michigan has, I know Eastern Michigan shut down their program, but you still have 3 major D1s there, right? And you have X amount of D1, D2, D3, and then everything else, NAI, JUCOs. So when it comes to, and that's just Michigan, but when it comes to like resources of finding athletes, resources of getting an athlete, and just like resources in general as a whole, do you find it difficult to compete for kids, knowing that you have so many schools, not only in the state of Michigan, but obviously south of you and southwest and southeast? Like, obviously, you're in a very good region for the sport of wrestling. So, where do you kind of fare when it comes to both the resources side of things, but also in the competition side of things when it comes to these athletes?
That's a good question, and so our recruiting philosophy has been literally working local. So we're located in Dowagiac, Michigan. So Dowagiac wrestling program, their head coach was one of my former wrestlers. So we literally start there and just kind of work our way out in a big circle. And want to give local kids, regional kids, an opportunity to go here, and that's where you build a lot of the base community support. But at the same time, you gotta kind of reach out to other kids, and we've got our first Ohio wrestler this year. We've got some Indiana wrestlers because we're just over the state line.
Yep.
We've got a couple kids that we've had them before that, Illinois, and so on and so forth. So, you kind of just let it grow, but you definitely start local, I believe, and just kind of work. And, recruiting wise, I'm very big on, you can't fit a square peg into a round hole. That you can't, I don't try to sell SMC. I want to promote what it has. It's a very scenic campus, beautiful. It's very clean, modern. But you might be from a big city and this might not be your thing. Or you might look and say, hey, this school offers the degree I'm looking for. Or that could work in the reverse, and we might have the one. We've got 3 trade programs, so that's been huge for our team. We've got a welding program, we've got a construction program, we've got an automotive program. So those all things help, and then you got your traditional ones, right? And you got other programs that, you may actually, whether you're going to wrestle at a 4-year school or just want to go on and get your bachelor's degree. So you're going to get just a general studies and transfer. And that's part of where we're at as a JUCO, where, you've got our classes transfer like all of them do. And so, you just got to make sure that you find the program that's right for the kids. And now that we're getting, I don't want to say better, we're improving as a wrestling team. We're figuring things out. They get more chances to wrestle at, D2 or D3 or NAI. So they do get a chance to really look outside their small little world and say, hey, there's a whole other world out there, education-wise, wrestling-wise. So, we try to stretch out. We go down to Kentucky and wrestle. One of my assistants wrestled for me, was a state champion. And, he went down to Kentucky. So we stretch out there. We're headed out to Iowa. We wrestle in Illinois, obviously Michigan. So we really try to Indiana. We went to Trine last weekend. So we really try to get out and see some other areas and expose kids to 4-year programs.
And I'm assuming, right, like you're going to all these tournaments not only to get your kids be seen by coaches if they choose to go to the 4-year school, but obviously that not only that promotes that you as a coach in your program are willing to travel, which then leads to how I guess earlier I mentioned that you guys have been ranked and finding some of that success. That I'm sure also helps with kind of both ways, right? So it probably helps with the high school kids seeing that, if I go to SMC, I'm going to it's going to be a program that's ranked, or we're going to be competitive, right? It's going to put them in a good place. To then it's also going to help them be seen by the college coaches to where the 4-year schools, and the 4-year schools also can build trust because they've seen that kid, they've seen they might have talked to that kid or yourself at these tournaments that you're going to as well. So it kind of works both for the high school kid maybe coming in, but also for that sophomore looking to go out as well. I would assume being that, and then obviously building success helps as well.
Yeah, Dave, it's a mix of a lot of different things. I mean, especially when we first started, a couple years ago, we were coming out of COVID. So you had kids that literally missed their senior year
Yep.
of wrestling. So we had an older group, but that kind of helped promote everything. It's like, hey, I want to get a education. Now, every kid that comes in, we've been fortunate that we've had a 30-man roster every year, and that's about what we can hold in this room. It's still a little bit cramped, and we get creative with our small groups and live day. But they get a chance to really figure out things and figure out life and figure out wrestling and figure out education. And, they're all the coaches out there. I don't care what sport you're in. I don't care what level. You wear a lot of different hats.
Mm-hmm.
You're a father figure. You're a coach. You're a teacher. And sometimes you're just sitting down and having conversations with kids. And so it's been, I don't want to say an odd dynamic, but definitely unique in a lot.
So then, as you're mentioning the dynamic and some of those things, how do you build a successful culture on the level of buy-in and mindset?
One thing that a couple things that we do. One, we let kids be who they are within the parameters of what we want.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're coming in here and you're an introvert, great, we'll figure it out. If you're coming in here and you're a goofball, knucklehead, and I say that with love, we let you be who you are in here. Outside of the room, I expect, please and thank you, holding doors open, making eye contact, shaking hands. We're big onto that, and I think we lost some of that during COVID. That,
Mm-hmm.
But you have, the old saying that you have 10, 15 seconds to make a first impression is huge, and staying in contact with your instructor. So, we kind of build around the fact that you're getting education first, and wrestling is an opportunity for you. So, and it's a very small part of your wrestling career. Now, most of these kids, when they move on at some point, they'll probably go into coach, whether it's youth wrestling, middle school, high school, and definitely college. I mean, listen, if I'm coaching in college, anybody can do it. So I just think, it's a good opportunity for them to just let them figure out life. And sometimes you just have to be patient. And again, they're going to make mistakes. They're going to make mistakes on the mat. They're going to make mistakes on campus. But, if we're all judged by the mistakes we made, listen, I make them every day. I make coaching mistakes, just no different than kids make wrestling mistakes. And you just kind of embrace that and try to learn from it and keep them moving forward.
100%. Yep. I like that you allow your kids to come in and be who they are, and I think that helps build the comfort level, or helps the kids be comfortable with what they're doing every day, right? Wrestling's a grind, and it's definitely it's good whenever kids can come in and be themselves. So how do you build a successful program on the level of wins? And in your case, right, getting to be nationally, turning a program from nothing to something, you could look at it that way, or just in general. How do you build a program for wins, and then how do you sustain that over time?
Well, we try to we all want to win, right? I mean, it doesn't matter what sport you're in, but especially with wrestling, it's so competitive, and everybody wins. And if you focus on that, and we just had this talk yesterday about, it's a process, and part of our job as coaches is to challenge you. It doesn't matter what you're doing in life. There are challenges out there. And in order for you to get better, you have to meet those challenges, however big they are or however small they are. And so we really, and all our kids want to win, all our coaches want to win, but you kind of take the emphasis off the winning and work around the fact that we're trying to get better in the process. And I've explained to kids that, listen, I'm not overly worried about wrestling in November. I don't need November, December wrestlers. I need February and March wrestlers, so that's what we're kind of, trying to figure out there, that, hey, it's a process and we're getting better over the long haul, and not so much the wins and losses right now, but the experiences of it. And are you figuring things out? Are you looking at your videos and saying, oh, I should have done that? Or are you, open to coaching? And, again, we're focusing more on the process and then what we're winning and losing right now. If you lose a match, but, it's something that you realize that, with college, there's riding time and there's a little bit different rules than we had. Now, I think everybody's embracing the 3-point takedowns and the 4-year fall. So, just our first year, we literally were trying to figure out college rules. And then the second year, they changed the college rules. So, and I've said this year that, again, we graduated a boatload of kids last year, and I was very happy about that. But that means that now we have a boatload of freshmen coming in. So we've got 30, 31, 32 kids, and 25 of them are freshmen. So, and then next year will be sophomore, and you got a whole group of experienced wrestlers. So we're trying to figure that part out too. So we really try to focus on the end result at whatever level you may be. And we've got kids that are just happy to be on a team. They're like, hey, I just want to be part of something. We got other kids that, I want to wrestle, I want to win. And, and then we got kids that are, my goal is to be in the starting lineup. My goal is to place at conference. My goal is to qualify for national. Goal is to be an All-American. So you kind of put levels on it and stack it on it that way. And, one of our most successful kids from our first year program struggled with making weight. He couldn't be a starter at one weight class. He couldn't beat the guy above him. He was struggling figuring out classes. Ended up, struggling with classes and everything with it. But he stayed the course and turned around the second year. He was an All-American. So, you kind of persevere through some of that. And it's not high school. If you're wrestling in high school, chances are you might get a bye the first round and a less experienced kid the second round, and you may not hit anybody until the regional finals or the state meet. In college, you're thrown right in. No seeding at these tournaments. Now, you get to the postseason, that's different. But you go out there and just start wrestling, and it's like, listen, just challenge yourself, figure it out, and get better. So that's kind of what we do. As far as, and our rules are really, really simple. I tell everybody when they come here, I usually on the recruiting is like, listen, show up every day, work hard every day, communicate every day. And the number one, follow directions. If we're running in the gym and I tell you to jog, you should be jogging, not walking. If I'm telling you to sprint, you should be sprinting, not walking or jogging. So same thing here, if we're drilling single legs and you're hitting headlocks, you're not following directions. So
correct.
That's kind of what we strive for every day. And we really work to have some fun with kids. We've got a team bonding coming up. We've done laser tag, paintball. We got Lake Michigan and the dunes here, so we run the dunes and we go to the beach early on when it's warm. We do all sorts of things. We went to the Michigan-Ohio State duel a couple of years ago. We didn't last year because it was in Columbus. We went to a Notre Dame basketball game. So it's a whole new world now from the 80s when I was there. And just try to mix in and have some fun with it and realize wrestling is a very small portion of their life. They only see what's right in front of them, but, getting an education, is a 5-year process or a 10-year process when you're up for that promotion and they say, hey, we'd like to have you have a 4-year degree, but we'll take an associate's degree, or pay for the other classes. So they have to figure that part out. And the other side of it is that maybe you're not going to college. Maybe you're going to jump right into the trades and be a bricklayer. Maybe you're going to go into the, services. And you got to kind of embrace that. These kids are trying to figure it out. I mean, I'm still trying to figure it out, and I'm 95. So there you go. That's how
95. Yeah. Well, you're sure as a hell. You're very technologically inclined for 95. That's for sure. Yeah. No, I love that. Trust the process. People say that all the time, but I think people overlook the process is the big picture process of getting here to here to here to here. It's every single day, the little tiny things that you're doing, right? You mentioned making weight, showing up, handshakes. Like it's what you're doing as a character, what you're doing every day when you wake up to when you go to bed to make tomorrow better. It's just they always say 1% better. That's part of the process, and so I love that your big thing about success comes from trusting the process of what that might be. So that leads me to my favorite question of the show. It's actually the name of the show. It's the coach's why. So why do you coach? What do you do this for? What's your why?
I think that, and I've been asked this before, and it was a big thing even when I was, doing another job. That why do you do it? And there's lots of different things. Whether it's the camaraderie of coaches, the competition, but in the end, I really want kids to progress in life. And it sounds sometimes like a cliche, but the truth is that these kids are going to be taking care of you and I in 10 or 15, 20 years. So we want them to be able to be productive and learn the different things, and also to figure out life by making mistakes, because we're far from perfect. And I lead the way on that one, and we've been fortunate also with, again, coaches, assistant coaches, in my case, even coaches that we compete against. They've been very helpful. And, our parents have been extremely helpful. We travel well. I mean, everywhere we go, we got 25, and it doesn't matter where we go. I'm talking 7 hours to Kentucky. We've got parents there. They do a great job with food table and making sure kids are, hydrated and ready to go after weigh-in. So, but in the end, the why is the kids. I've been blessed with very good kids, and I don't mean wrestlers. I mean just good kids that, trying to figure out life. So that would be my why. I mean, I know that when I started, way back when, going to college, again with Coach Judd, that, my dad had passed away and I had no idea what I was going to do. I just but I just dove into wrestling, and it wouldn't have to be wrestling. It could be anything. It might be, another sport. It might be the chess club. It might be band, whatever's out there. Esports now, with the video. Yep. But you jump into things and you learn to make it through the bad times and realize that, guess what? The sun's going to come up the next day. And, again, the number one foundational part of our program is the kids. And it's been blind luck as far as, recruiting kids, and you get them on campus and you see the growth and you see the change. Yeah, sometimes it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but they're still moving forward. You try to stay in contact with kids that leave the program, even the kids that don't graduate, that went into the Army or went into the trades or realized that college wasn't for them. And in some cases, that's what they're trying to figure out, and they're not sure. Coach, I'm not sure if I can go to college. I'm not sure if I can wrestle in college. Give it a try. Instead of wondering, 10 years from now, what if, or 10 years from now, you're playing video games in your mom and dad's basement and you realize, hey, I'm 30 now and I have no job skills. I have no education. What am I going to do? So instead, come in and scratch that itch, be part of the wrestling team, and figure out education and grow as a person.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah, I mean, just to be honest with you, that sounds like something I should probably say to some kids too sometimes, because they say they want to as a freshman, sophomore, and then when they get to that senior year, they're like, I don't want to do it. But I'm going to have to start using that one, just say, hey, what are you going to do in 10 years, right? Maybe I'll do it. I have to adjust to it, but I definitely think that's a very, very good, for one, a great why, doing it for the kids, doing it for their purpose, not only now, but for the future. And I think that's why we all coach, is for not only right now, but what it's going to teach them and hopefully get them to be in the next part of their life. No, not every, you're not going to wrestle forever. Even if you get to the, Jordan Burroughs level of good, right? It's going to take, at some point he's going to have to hang him up. So 100% agree to what are you going to do after your time's done? So, I love it. I love everything you've given me, all the gems you've given us. I have two more questions for you. It's going to be more on the fun side now, though. These are going to be more of the fun end of the show questions. If you guys are still watching this on YouTube, make sure you guys like, subscribe, all that stuff. If you're an audio listener, PocketCasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever, make sure you guys leave a review, hit those stars, whatever you say. Actually, I messed up my outro. Say what you mean what you say, and whatever you say with your chest. Coach, these are the final two questions for you. Who's the best wrestler / college wrestler that you've ever seen?
Oh, that I've ever seen personally?
Just in general.
Well, that's a funny question in the fact that, I go all the way back to Dan Gable, right?
Yeah.
Bruce Baumgartner, John Smith. I mean,
yeah.
And even if you fast forward to Cale Sanderson, most kids know Cale Sanderson now as a coach. They don't know him as a wrestler.
Yeah. 150, 158-0 or 156-0 is tough.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
And that part of it is, guess what? There's no way that he woke up every day and felt like wrestling. There's no way that he wake up with a cold or the flu or, overwhelmed with a test or struggling with his weight or whatever the case may be, but managed to, make that compartment in his mind and understand that this is the job I'm going to do. So when you talk about those great ones, most of these kids have no idea. Like Dan Gable,
yeah.
Who's he?
Dan Gable, yeah. Iconic, of course.
And so, one of the most impressive ones that I saw, and I've actually watched him wrestle, I'm going to give you two names.
Okay.
One is John Smith.
Of course.
Because he was probably, and I don't want to ever, Lord knows I don't want to ever downgrade his talent, but he's a 5-tool type of guy. He didn't have, he had that low single.
No,
and he knew what he was going to do. He said, listen, I'm not wrestling your way. You're wrestling my way. And he wasn't, he wasn't physically intimidating or overwhelming. He was kind of lanky and, he was just impressive at how he approached it and just his mental toughness and just the way that, and I'm sure I try to read that things like that because it's so interesting and you get all the little tidbits. The other one of my, and I don't know if I'm deciding who my favorite is or who the best is, but Kerry Colott. I
for sure.
watch his stuff. I see it on Rudis and everywhere else. And it's just, I'm amazed and I love how he talks and how I don't want to say blunt, but very
direct.
He's very direct and tactfully blunt. Maybe that's the way to put it.
Yeah, I was gonna say tactically, he's very, very good for sure.
Yeah,
very good technically.
But he also is very honest about things. And like when I listen to him, he's like, "Yeah, I do have self-doubt. Yeah, I do go to that dark place. Or yeah, you're down by 2. What are you gonna do?" And so I appreciate the fact, and and I explain to kids that we all have that doubt. I don't care who you are. I don't care what level. If you're out here at SMC, as me as a coach, I have doubts, and even the great ones. And I just firmly believe that every wrestler or every coach has that dark spot that you have to battle. You know, so
100%.
I two are John Smith and Kerry Collette. I don't want to take away from any of the other great ones.
Of course, no, I agree. Yeah, and that was one of the few techniques, well, a lot of techniques from John that we try to teach in the program. But his low single was amazing. So, but yeah, Kerry, I took a lot of technique from him. I don't ever say my opinion though, because I did in one episode about a different sport, and I was like, man, now I can't really hold it in and keep that, when I actually want to express it. So I won't say anything about my favorite wrestler, but let's just say the two that you mentioned are very, very good. And I love everything that they have to say and everything that they've done. And obviously I hope Kerry does well at Navy, and hopefully he can turn that program around as well and get them back to, to dominance. So, my final question for you is, what's the best state in the country for high school wrestling?
Oh, Pennsylvania.
PA, okay. Hell yeah, I appreciate everything you just went into, Coach, and spending your time with me today. I would love to get you back on maybe at another time, and maybe we can maybe talk shop a little bit more behind the scenes stuff, maybe about your coaching style and things like that we didn't get to talk about today.
That sounds great. This was much better experience than what I was thinking it was going to be. So I was just the introvert in me. It was like, I don't know about this, but yeah, it was great. It's good to kind of figure things out.
Yeah, no, I was actually going to say I appreciate you being an introvert and still wanting to talk and talk shop. Geez, I don't know what the hell's going on in my mind and my verbiage and my grammar today, but it's not here. But I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come do this. And if you guys are still listening to this, thank you guys so much. But we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.